Diplomats definitely don't get enough credit for avoiding galactic wars. Serving as an ambassador on an alien world is much like a foreigner trying to understand local slang. Just when you think you've got it, you inadvertently insult someone's mother, which is a really bad idea when dealing with insectoid hive races. Welcome back to another Sci-Fi Sunday here on SFIA, where we examine concepts popular in science fiction and ask if they could one day become science fact, and what that might look like. Today's topic is about alien ambassadors, both aliens who might visit us as diplomats and our ambassadors to them, and even entire worlds devoted to serving as meeting grounds for many alien civilizations to meet, trade, and work together. Or possibly meet to debate how they'll conquer the galaxy. We'll also deep dive into the embassy aspect from a couple well-known sci-fi settings like Babylon 5, the Citadel of Mass Effect, and settings like Star Trek, Star Wars, and Stargate. Almost as soon as we started dreaming up alien civilizations, we imagined meeting with them, and wondered what a sustained interaction with those civilizations might look like. They tended to draw on embassies and consulates from the past and present, along with various analogies to the United Nations and other multi-state bodies and confederacies we've seen in our history. In our last episode, Fermi Paradox Interdiction, we looked at aliens who stay far from each other purposefully and interact little, with huge buffer zones of depleted space around them, and today we'll go the other direction, tons of aliens everywhere. While we see plenty of multi-species empires in well-known franchises like Star Trek and Star Wars, and indeed once did an episode on it, embassies tend to get less focus. They really should be given more attention, not merely because the bureaucracy in such empires is a nightmare because of paperwork, but more so because deciding who gets the bigger office is a delicate matter of interstellar importance, one that could seriously result in a diplomatic galactic-wide incident. In fiction, either establishing an embassy is another job for an exploratory crew encountering aliens in their journey, or it's a one-episode plot device where the alien ambassador is just there to introduce a new crew member, get a crew member into trouble, or give some vague and foreboding information about some other mysterious civilization or region of space. Deep dives on the concept itself of an alien embassy or ambassador are fairly uncommon, but it is a fascinating concept, and essentially the reverse case of last week's earlier look at interdiction hypothesis, again where alien civilizations interact minimally. So I thought we'd look at three cases for today. One where we have a big United Nations in space, where all sorts of aliens come and meet, a singular embassy on our one world from an alien civilization, and the idea of having an embassy on some alien world. Probably the best known example of that first case is Babylon 5, the space station in the series of the same name for the 1990s. It was an O'Neill cylinder where tons of aliens had their embassies, and the Citadel from the Mass Effect video games, which seems to have drawn on Babylon 5 for inspiration. Alternatively, we see an alien civilization with an embassy here on Earth in another 1990s sci-fi TV series, Gene Roddenberry's Earth Final Conflict, where an advanced and seemingly peaceful and friendly alien civilization arrives and offers us a hand and sets up a few embassies to assist in integrating their technologies and ideas into our civilization. I don't think we see too many cases of life as an ambassador to a single alien civilization too often. Usually the writers want to move on to other strange new places after an episode or two on one alien world. But Star Trek Deep Space Nine, also from the 1990s, while focused mostly on a space station next to a wormhole from which many new aliens are met, has 7 seasons, and during that gives us a very deep look at the life of Benjamin Sisko, the station's commander, who is essentially the ambassador to the Bajoran civilization the station is located in the territory of, and the Cardassian Empire, who previously ruled over the Bajorans and bordered the station. That series centers on life on a space station next to the only known stable wormhole in the galaxy, and allows travel to the other side of that galaxy in mere minutes when their normal warp drive would take decades. It is very rare we see any sort of alien embassies where we don't have fairly casual FTL, faster-than-light travel, and yet we tend to assume on this show that it isn't very likely we would ever have that. Though to be fair, we tend to assume we'll probably never find another alien civilization in our galaxy either. So for today, we will discuss some no FTL scenarios for lots of alien sending ambassadors or Martians, such as in Alastair Reynolds' Revengers series. We are going to relax our usual no FTL rule. It is, after all, Sci-Fi Sunday. And speaking of relaxing, don't forget to grab a drink and a snack, and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're at it. Now, an awful lot depends on how close everyone is and how common. And in your classic space opera setting, whatever the actual spacing of the stars, you can usually get around the region of space everyone is from in something like days to weeks, and it has dozens if not hundreds of alien civilizations in it, as much as the special effects and costume and makeup budgets permit. You may or may not have instant communication like we do now, which very much alters the dynamics of what sort of powers your ambassador needs to have to be useful, as well as what their job is. An ambassador's job description would likely be so varied that you have to expect Interstellar Barista to be in there, because somehow making a perfect Glorfnakian espresso is key to maintaining peace. A lot of times nowadays, especially if two civilizations are on relatively friendly terms, this is one part envoy, one part spy, one part tourism spokesman, one part party host, and several more parts for handling visas, visiting citizens in trouble, public relations in general, and a lot of law and contract oversight. How much of these you are doing is also very dependent on your means of travel. For instance, in a classic spherical expansion model of colonization, if we simplified by assuming everybody has been roughly evenly distributed in homeworlds, and all got started about the same time and rate, which is very unlikely of course, you would have 12 neighboring alien spheres touching you because you have 3 dimensions to work with. Not many countries have 12 nations bordering them, and those are usually ones much larger than their neighbors and not very compact. Russia and China share the record at 14 neighbors each, including each other, and are the first and third largest countries by landmass, whereas Canada and the United States, at second and fourth largest, don't have very many neighbors. Of course, it gets more confusing if we talk about overlapping sphere of influence out in the ocean or some colony somewhere on another continent, and France comes in third for borders at 12 because it includes Brazil and Suriname in South America. Brazil itself is fourth at 10 land neighbors. If you start including practical borders of shared seas, then that number would jump a lot, and I would imagine the British Empire at its height would have had dozens of neighbors, especially as countries tend to be smaller in the past. In space, that ocean analogy is a lot more appropriate, as while we can draw a big blob of a map with all of a civilization's stars in it, the conceptual spacing there would be like an archipelago whose dozen or so islands were scattered across the whole Pacific Ocean. They're not really in a position to meaningfully claim that ocean or prevent others from moving through it. And indeed, space is far worse, as even some system populated way out to the edge of its Kuiper belt, bordering 12 other systems that did the same, is inhabiting something like a trillionth of that territory, and someone passing through there on their way elsewhere probably wouldn't come within 1,000 times the distance from a system that its inhabited zone was wide. Space borders are very much like trying to fence in the ocean, a bold statement of ownership with practical implications that are at best philosophical. Even ignoring that it would be very unlikely civilizations would all start spreading at the same time, given the age of the galaxy and timeline involved in evolution, it is also very unlikely an actual civilization would end up very spherical either, as it would have more room to spread in some directions than others, and spread towards valuable real estate like star clusters more energetically. The other aspect is that we wouldn't really expect a single ambassador from a single species to be the norm. Expecting a single representative for an entire sprawling civilization is like expecting one waiter to handle a restaurant during lunch hour, overly optimistic and a recipe for disaster. I think even with FTL, it would be pretty hard to get a single representative from just one planet, let alone one developed star system. Spreading it out to some civilizations spread over 1 million systems for a few hundred light years all around, and it gets really dubious that one nation per species would be common. And this is assuming the classic warp drive that takes you through normal space, but just way faster than light travels. The dynamic changes a lot if we got Stargate-style wormholes in play, where everyone in that gate network has the equivalent of a phone number you can dial. And even other distant networks for other galaxies might just be adding on a long-distance area code and cost. Nobody is really your neighbor in a situation like that, especially as it is planet-to-planet direct travel, so you don't necessarily have much of a presence in space. Your spaceships exist for taking stargates to other planets you've identified as either good places to terraform or particularly handy for resources or trade. As we discussed in our episode on stargates last month, depending on how big you can make and operate a portal like that, it might be something where you have one per planet for moving at most a few thousand people and parallel amount of cargo around a day to various places in the galaxy, like we might see in Stargate SG-1, to where you can pop open a mile-wide portal for dumping oceans from oceanic worlds to arid planets to get more livable planets out of both. That's two very different ends of a wide spectrum of options for how much throughput you can get through your portals, and it very much alters what those civilizations and their relations with other civilizations look like. How you make your portals matters a lot too, as in the case of the portals from Stargate or the wormhole from Deep Space Nine, those are easily defended and static locations that make an invasion through them well nigh impossible by brute force. Massive technology advantages, treachery, and Trojan horses are another story, of course. Alternatively, if you can pop open a portal wherever you please on someone else's planet, you can dump a few divisions of shock troops, or just a variety of nukes, chemical weapons, or robot killmajigs through. Strategies for defense tend to rely on mutually assured destruction, coming in retaliation from secret bases full of doomsday devices, and is actually the situation in the fictional setting of Frank Herbert's Dune that the various film adaptations tend to leave out to explain why they use relatively small and elite infantry units. They all have huge nuclear stockpiles hidden around space, so their militaries are a personal guard, police force, and pack of assassins and commandos. The additional factor of the Spacing Guild further limits major battles, and so their empire's 10,000-year history is punctuated by long vendettas and wars of assassins, and their equivalent to a UN is the Landsraad and CHOAM, their League of Nobles and Merchant Association respectively. Lots of maneuvering, very few open wars, especially at the grand scale or using scorched earth tactics. We see similar scenarios when you're comparing warp travel, where you can attack from anywhere in huge 3D volumes of space and have to guard all approaches, to those where you're limited by some equivalent to the trade winds, like hyperspace lanes we see in Star Wars that make travel along them much easier and safer and give you a place to focus your defenses. Given that an awful lot of diplomacy is based around loose and opportunistic agreements not to beat your neighbor up and take their stuff, the diplomatic landscape shifts a lot based on what travel around the galactic landscape looks like. In Mass Effect, for instance, everything is based around the Mass Effect relays that let them toss spaceships around the galaxy very quickly. They have regular FTL they can use to travel many times the speed of light in whatever direction they wish, but the ancient enormous relay network lets them move between any of those relays in the galaxy nearly instantly, where the FTL systems they have only permit you to travel several light years per day, meaning you could get to Alpha Centauri or other neighboring stars in a day or less, but crossing the galaxy by FTL rather than a relay might take decades, and intergalactic travel centuries. Needless to say, those rare relays are incredibly prized, and because travel between them dumps you out at random at an unpredictable location and vector in a zone near them many thousands of kilometers wide, they become impractical to robustly mine and fortify. The nominal central hub of the relay system is a giant space station called the Citadel that's become a hub for diplomacy and trade. For various plot reasons I won't spoil, none of these civilizations are very old or developed, by the standards of this channel anyway, where a Kardashev 2 civilization is considered unimpressive and yet could single-handedly have wiped the floor with every faction in that game simultaneously, including the big bads. In that setting, humanity ends up on the galactic stage after an unintentional war with one of the big three powers in the galaxy and on the Citadel, and eventually managed to make its way into joining them to be the Big Four, forming the equivalent to the UN Security Council, with dozens of other minor powers who have been on the galactic stage themselves for some centuries, but nobody's been around for many millennia, though the galaxy is covered in lots of habitable planets and alien ruins. The same is the case for Babylon 5 or B5, where we have the Big Five instead, of which humanity is basically the tough new kid on the block, and a league of unaligned civilizations that are the various UN equivalents. They have a giant space station there too, which provides gravity by spin, just like the Citadel does, and thus has higher and lower layers with differing gravity that they can pump different atmosphere mixes into for various alien biologies. though for budget constraints, we hear about most of those more often than we see them. The realism of that is of course a handwave so that a humanity not too far in the future can realistically be a significant player on the galactic stage, so none of the other empires are too old or big, and the ones that are have strange and mysterious motives. The Vorlons, one of the Big Five on B5, play that role, as do the Minbari to a lesser extent, and the station got built after humanity got into a very one-sided war with the Minbari and technically won, after the Minbari mysteriously surrendered after winning basically every engagement. The war was found to be over a regrettable misunderstanding, and humanity decided that to avoid future such incidents, they would help build a giant space station around a neutral and apparently uninhabited planet and administer it to be a place of diplomacy and trade. And the show is about the principally human command staff trying to run a mix of the UN and a pioneer outpost, with the ambassadors and aides of the four major powers being major characters too. It is an excellent show, and they try hard to keep the aliens very alien in appearance and behavior rather than the traditional new forehead of the week we see in Star Trek, but they have the same budget and writing limitations. That war, for instance, gets started because the Minbari encounter a human expedition, and initially were just told vaguely that their way of showing peaceful intent is to have their gun ports open on ships encountering other spaceships, and an equivalent to the empty hand extended for a handshake, to show no weapon in hand. Unfortunately, the human crew interpreted it as a hostile act and fired, and the Minbari's supreme leader was there and got killed in the damage to the ship, so they declared war and refused to negotiate. Great show, but the writing on this part of the story got more confused and weird as the show progressed, until we see the actual event and the war that followed, and essentially the huge and advanced Minbari ships encounter the small human exploration squadron and scan them so hard they screw up their sensors and controls, so that it seems like an attack, and they fire back, damaging the sensors, and flee as soon as that happens. The Minbari ignore all communications from humanity after that, and murder everyone. And the scene comes off like an alien ambassador arriving on Earth and walking down the ramp of his ship, firing a machine gun off wildly in the air, and then acting the aggrieved party because we thought it was a hostile act and shot him, taking disproportionate vengeance by blowing up several of our cities or even the whole planet. This is the problem with writing scenes like that, and very common in a lot of sci-fi, because you want alien acting aliens but also relatable ones. And a lot of the times the alien stuff comes off as irrational to us, which is good, but then as it gets explored more, it just comes off as truly irrational rather than operating under alien morality we didn't understand yet. That's why alien diplomats will get training on how to handle being offered a cup of Earth coffee or tea without triggering an intergalactic incident over caffeine tolerance, or past what to them was the equivalent of molten lava in a crucible. Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle explore that idea in their classic novel The Molten God's Eye, where they encounter an alien ship for the first time and it fires on them and damages them badly, and the human ship's commander fires right back and methodically takes the alien ship apart. When the slightly strawman scientists yell at him afterward for firing on what they assume was an automated anti-collision system, the rebuttal is that if you are going to send exploration vessels and probes out into the galaxy, the burden is on you to make sure they have at least some safeguards in place to avoid firing on a ship that is clearly an artificial construct, not a meteor, or not to ram into planets and so on. That still leaves a lot of room for error and misunderstanding, of course, so it definitely makes sense to approach other civilizations cautiously and with protocols built around de-escalation rather than escalation. There's obviously no guarantee they would view it the same way. This also isn't one of those things we can handwave to math and science being a universal language. It is very likely any place where complex life has evolved will have a clear idea of what aggression is, along with escalation and de-escalation. And I wouldn't go so far as to say those are all inevitable under evolution, but they would seem right up there with things like curiosity, where it would be hard to imagine any planet producing a civilization without these. Nonetheless, it is going to be an abstract and variable concept that might not paste well onto other species. For instance, eyeballs are likely to be common in the universe, given how many separate times they've apparently evolved on Earth and how useful they are. But while on Earth, staring at someone is mostly a sign of interest and frequently of aggression, it might be viewed as no such thing by another species, which might also be fine getting 1 foot from you and staring at you, or glaring at you, which might not even vaguely imply a lack of respect or menace by them. Interacting with alien species with completely different social cues is like trying to understand modern internet slang as a Victorian, baffling, slightly horrifying, but profoundly educational. Alternatively, they might be mortally offended at you constantly exhaling near them or dropping dead skin cells everywhere. We're also all still animals for most of our thinking, and even if you're expecting a given behavior and know it is innocent, you might feel constant anxiety just being in a room with a 2-ton alien monster with fangs as long as your hand, and whose hamster cage by their desk is the equivalent of a snack drawer. On the flip side, you walk in to see another of your colleagues and show off your new pair of leather boots, and they go into shock or flee to the corner, even if you tell them it's vat-grown or synthetic leather. Because hanging out with a species that wears other animals' skins is to them like having Pinhead from the Hellraiser franchise as an office mate. Again, even if they're not off a once-living animal, it might be like a creepy coworker keeping a jar full of glass eyes on their desk and assuring you they do not use real eyes anymore. The reality is that a human and an alien from an entirely different evolutionary origin might find each other's presence in the same room almost unbearable, and minor differences in temperature and oxygen composition, assuming they even operate in an atmosphere like ours, might be very uncomfortable. So it isn't very likely many aliens would want to share a home or workspace with other aliens or us. That doesn't mean they're any less capable than we of consciously stepping back and setting aside evolutionary behavioral differences and biologically unsettling traits, but that's a lot easier to do with some distance. This also doesn't mean you have to go the interdiction hypothesis level of things, where you only maintain the loosest diplomatic ties, but it might mean pretty much all contact is conducted virtually rather than face-to-face. Or that we might use filter layers where AI translates your appearance and reactions into the alien equivalent for them and vice versa. Or that a lot of business might be conducted with everyone in spacesuits. After all, spacefaring civilization with more lightweight garb than we have nowadays might already lean in pretty heavily on wearing full bodysuits when traveling to other locations just to minimize spread of germs. On the other hand, humans might be an anomaly at wearing lots of clothing. I've heard clothing presented as a Fermi paradox filter before, but never found it very compelling, even if I would expect a lot of aliens to wear pouches and belts around. Thus, they might find wearing masks or other gear near their breathing orifices or sensory organs even more upsetting than we tend to. Spacesuits are not actually a necessity for space exploration. You can use a travel pod like a landing module or diving bell, and just use remote control robot hands for interacting. Indeed, as we discussed elsewhere, an android ambassador remote controlled from back of the ship and set to mimic basic human appearance and behavior is entirely plausible. So a human-looking alien stepping out of the UFO to greet us and ask to be taken to our leaders doesn't imply improperly convergent evolution, just that they've seen our movies and decided it's best to avoid mass panic by revealing their true Lovecraftian Cthulhu tentacled form. This is also exactly when space habitats are preferable, as the moment an alien steps out unprotected into a planet's ecology, there's a high probability they've been dangerously contaminated, especially if they can actually survive in that environment, as it implies the microbes they've got can too, and vice versa. Viruses are less of a concern. Those tend to have problems jumping species, let alone biological kingdoms, but a bacteria might do just fine, and a few decades later have saturated that planet with itself, green gooing a place as opposed to grey goo. High-tech civilizations would tend to have lots of options for managing and containing such problems, but opting to make your diplomatic city on a space habitat instead of someone's planet makes a lot more sense. And it is also very easy for them to bring their own smaller space habitat to connect to the big one so they can just live and work there mostly, interacting remotely, and only show up to formal and special events in the flesh, or in their ceremonial environmental suit or android. That might be preferable because diplomacy with aliens is a delicate dance, where stepping on toes might not just be a faux pas, but an actual diplomatic incident. But getting back to the ship opening here on Earth that lands on the White House lawn or in the UN gardens, again there'd be nothing surprising about that critter strolling down the ramp looking entirely human, and indeed it would be surprising if it didn't speak English or the primary language of whatever land it set down in. It probably blinks and breathes like one of us too, but it probably didn't learn that language much unless it was fairly heavy on cybernetic mind augmentation that made picking up languages as easy as opening a file. Rather, a team of experts will have pieced the languages together and created an AI to do the translating. We shouldn't take for given that every spacefaring civilization has several hundred different languages like we do, but it probably wouldn't be unusual either. An ambassador coming to a planet might take the time to learn the lingua franca, or main trade language if they got it, but probably more as an attempt at better understanding, and would likely use an AI translator for speaking and hearing anyway. And that's a good idea. There's a classic Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man, that when they find out how to translate the alien language, makes them realize the giant and seemingly benevolent, if creepy, aliens who came to Earth are migrating humans off Earth with the intent of eating them, the title being the name of a book that humans find and eventually realize is a cookbook. The problem is, with an alien, that might actually be a regular set of euphemisms in their language, much as eat me was pretty common when I was growing up. But if you encounter a race of shark people or something, they might be entirely civilized and sincerely friendly and eat only synthetic meat, and not understand, or care, that we were disturbed they added humans to the menu and freely joke about it and hand off a case of synthetic shark people steaks to our ambassador with a quip about how it was his turn now since he'd been on the menu last week, after they grabbed some of his DNA before dinner. And honestly, that's on the non-grisly side. There's no reason to assume cannibalism is rare out in the universe given that it isn't rare here, and there's no special reason to think it would always carry health downsides either. So they might think it weird we don't eat our dead or that we keep pets, and it's realizing that something like that gets baked into the language at a very deep level, as does everyone's base psychology, even those bits they think of themselves as having outgrown and become too civilized to really do. So you really want an AI able to translate the right way, not literally, or even just switching in the euphemisms for the alien equivalent. Nor would you likely have a shared language aliens in a region of the galaxy all agreed to speak. Expecting aliens to agree on a common language or system of measurement is optimistic. Humans can't even agree on metric versus imperial. Imagine negotiating that with a species that uses random quantum fluctuations as a unit of measure. There is no real need to do this, though. A computer can easily translate back and forth between thousands of different systems of measurement or calendars, and expressions like 1 in a million odds might sound weirdly specific to an alien the way them saying 1 in 16,777,216 would to us, when if you have a base 8 system because you've only got 4 fingers on each hand, is 8 to the 8th power, and likely a significant number in your language. There's also ulterior motives for folks moving to Embassy Town, so to speak. Much as we wonder what the Canamites want of humans in that Twilight Zone episode, or what ulterior motive the Talons have for visiting us in Earth's final conflict and helping us out, you have to wonder who agrees to live on an alien planet, or a literally cosmopolitan city full of folks from all over the cosmos. Curiosity can be weird, and while we contemplate eating alien food out of curiosity, in most cases you'd likely need a major overhaul to your biology or massive doses of medication so as not to get sick from it, let alone enjoy its flavor or derive nutrition from it. Especially if it were full of microbes like yogurt or beer might be, and now those are in your gut. Not to say a lot of folks might not do it anyway. As we like to say on the show, alien beer is to die for, or to write a whole extra spontaneous episode for that actually came out 2 months before this one. But without ever venturing to the headspace of someone who would get themselves augmented to be able to eat and drink and enjoy alien cuisine, or the terrifying implications of Rule 34 of the internet moved into the alien arena, xenophiles might be as mentally disturbed as xenophobes. The embassy motto might be that you don't have to be crazy to work here, but it sure does help. Now to close out, we should shift this into what we think of as the most probable scientific case, and that is the absence of FTL travel or communication, and a scenario in which aliens evolved on another planet are pretty rare, none within at least several thousand light years of us, which still allows hundreds of civilizations in this galaxy alone. I would be surprised if alien civilizations were even that numerous in an entire supercluster. But it still means huge territories of tens of millions of star systems. In cases like this, where a civilization is constantly mutating as it spreads out into the galaxy, when it bumps into aliens, It's on the leading edge of two expanding spheres, so that your borders are two-dimensional surfaces with some depth, and one between two civilizations 10,000 light-years apart might have several, which would include 1,000,000 star systems that count as border or near-border systems. Yet these might be founded by chunks of your civilization, and were tens of thousands of years divergent from their homeworld or those cousins of theirs off on the other side of that border region. Very occasionally you'd have smaller volumes where 3 or 4 alien civilizations met too. And there's no communication back and forth to their homeworld here. Nobody is waiting 10,000 years on a message to get home and back. Civilizations expanding and bumping into each other makes for a cosmic game of I call dibs, with the added challenge of no one having a universal rulebook. So what you really have is 10,000 local interstellar empires, each of which has some friendships and rivalries with its lateral neighbors, and relationships with a handful of alien empires of common descent to each other nearby. It's a big and diverse enough volume that you could be mostly at peace, while across that border surface 1,000 different wars rage between this and that alien empire and a local human one, or 2 humans fighting 1 alien, or an alien in a human realm fighting as allies against a few alien kingdoms, or every combination imaginable. Which goes up when you keep in mind that the nominal human factions might include entire star empires founded by uplifted dolphins, chimpanzees, cyborgs, AI, and so on, and the same for the aliens. And all of these are likely to have border stations, with both the actual aliens and each other, that are meant to serve as neutral ground, or even third-party controlled monitors, not to mention their own seedy undersides for smugglers, contraband, refugees, mercenaries, and all the other dystopian window dressing of your typical sci-fi setting near a border or neutral zone. Now, the good news for space opera fans is that is exactly the sort of environment where you have tons of aliens nearby, even if you all trace your origins back to a shared homeworld. You could have some local star clusters like the Pleiades, where you've got around 1,000 stars packed into a 40 light-year radius, and even denser near the core, which might easily be some sprawling and overlapping collection of Dyson swarms by the year 12,000 AD, 10,000 years from now, settled by a number of human clades, both direct genetic descendants and our various spiritual children and accidental monster babies exiled to deep space. In that volume, where communication everywhere takes less than a century, and you've got potentially 1 trillion times our current population there, you could easily sport 1 trillion different civilizations at least as unique as anything we're used to seeing in Star Trek, all of whom should have at least 1,000,000 neighbors within a few months of signal lag, and often a lot closer. So you really will end up with entire artificial worlds given over to being neutral meeting grounds, and more of them than most space opera empires have regular worlds. Choosing a location for diplomacy is like picking a restaurant for a first date, neutral territory, but everyone's still judging based on the ambiance. This will be even more true of Earth, as a lot of civilizations that left here long back have lots of plausible motivations to keep or re-establish ties with us. And the good news is that you probably could eat the alien cuisine in these cases, or date the blue or green-skinned alien girl from Orion, or the guy with 2 heads and 3 arms who likes to hitchhike around the galaxy. With potentially millions of civilizations, the galaxy might just be the ultimate definition of "it's complicated" when it comes to interstellar relationship status, be it individuals or neighboring interstellar nations. Our topic today being alien embassies, there is that big question of how you find those other civilizations and let them know where to meet, especially in a no FTL universe. And that's something we discussed more in last month's Nebula exclusive, Galactic Beacons, along with other uses you might have for such beacons, how you might make one, and how we might find any that currently exist. One of the big questions there was how you keep one operating for potentially millions of years, and we have that same problem for some interstellar civilization or group of them was seeking to protect our primitive world from interference, Prime Directive style. And we explore that in this month's Nebula exclusive, Machine Monitors, where we also look at other purposes you might need them for, how smart you want your machine mind to be, and how you keep it on task and loyal even when your own civilization might have changed its own mind or even gone extinct. Machine Monitors is out now exclusively on Nebula, our streaming service, where you can also see every regular episode of SFIA a few days early and ad-free, as well as our other bonus content, including extended editions of mini-episodes and more Nebula exclusives like last month's episode Galactic Beacons, Crystal Aliens from Mulch, February's Topopolis, the Eternal River, January's Giant Space Monsters, December's episode The Fermi Paradox, Hermit-Schafter Hypothesis, Ultra-Relativistic Spaceships, Dark Stars at the Beginning of Time, Life as an Asteroid Minor, Nomadic Miners on the Moon, Space Freighters, Retro Causality, Orc OR and Free Will, and more. Nebula has tons of great content from an ever-growing community of creators, and we now have news and classes content. Using my link and discount, it's available now for just over $2.50 a month, less than the price of the drink or snack you might have been enjoying during the episode. I'm also glad to announce that lifetime memberships for Nebula are again for sale for $300 and get you access to Nebula for as long as you and Nebula both exist, while helping support further improvements to the platform and more original content. When you sign up by my link, go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur and use my code IsaacArthur, you not only get access to all the great stuff Nebula offers, like machine monitors, you'll also be directly supporting this show. Again, to see SFIA early, ad-free, and with all the exclusive bonus content, go to go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur. We'll be continuing our look at massive galactic civilizations and empires this Thursday, May 26, as we consider the enormous cosmic capitals that might oversee them. We were also considering alien minds a lot today, and on May 26 we'll look at a different kind of alien mind, one much closer to hand, such as animal brains, as we examine alternative intelligence, the other AI. Then we'll take an extended look at space freighters, what they'll carry and who will crew them on Sunday, May 26, before wrapping the month up with a trip to Ganymede, the largest of the moons of Jupiter, and indeed the largest moon in our solar system, and we'll ask if perhaps humanity might settle this moon. If you'd like to get alerts when those and other episodes come out, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. You'd also help support the show by becoming a member here on YouTube or Patreon, or check out other ways to help at isaacarthur.net. As always, thanks for watching, and have a great week.